India is a subcontinent surrounded on three sides by water and snuggled up in the north against the Himalayan range. The population of India is second only to China, and at 1.2 billion, it's poised to overtake China in the next decade or so. India is also a country in the midst of change. The IT revolution and back office outsourcing have changed the way the country works. But more importantly, it's changed the way the world views India. In 1991, the Indian economy was liberalized and therefore enabled to compete internationally. Now, this brought great wealth into the country and, in fact, changed the way things went from then on. For example, we now have 48 billionaires, according to Forbes magazine, from India. But on the other hand, you also have poverty in a very, very visible way. What liberalization has done is completely revolutionized the way the Indian middle class works. Now, the Indian middle class has been turned into a consumer-driven section with shopping malls, international food courts, and a burgeoning auto industry. Speaking of auto industry, this is also the country which has come up with the world's most affordable car, which is priced approximately at 3,000 US dollars. When it comes to Indian culture, this is actually very interesting because Indian culture is not one culture. It's regional cultures, community cultures, all rolled up into one. So on a lighter vein, if you were to ask how many Indians are in India, the answer would be zero. Because in India, your primary identity comes from your regional identity or from the city that you originated. So this does not mean that Indians are not proud of their country or their culture.
No, that is true, but there are some common denominators, and that is that in India there is a more hierarchical, tends to be more hierarchical. Authority plays a very strong role. Now, mentioning that as well, there's a place in society for education. Education, it's a very strong role. And as a result of that, there's a strong emphasis on certain career paths. Now, that may include medicine and also things like engineering. There's also a tendency toward the group over the individual, and individualism can also have a somewhat negative tinge. There's also the notion of bending the rules in order to follow the rules. Now, shifting toward that lighter note, it's also very big here to the notion of cinema. Everyone is familiar with it as Bollywood. And there's also the notion of cricket. Both of these things can have, well, almost religious proportions with the participants, the stars and the players rising to kind of a godlike stature. And you can see these individuals plastered in every type of imaginable advertising. It's going to be in film, in billboards, on television commercials, in the newsprint every day. And they're hawking virtually every type of product. Now, it may look difficult to understand from the outside looking in. There's a lot of stuff going on. However, it works. And the process is all transparent. Now, it's a process-oriented culture, and so it's process before task. Now, it's also relationship before task. Now, the task matters, the results matter. However, intention is an integral part. Now remember, fate intercedes. You simply cannot control everything.
Speaking of control, actually when it comes to law and order in India, things can get a little arbitrary, and India can seem to be a bit of a wild place. Now, enforcement can be perceived as arbitrary, and often who you are and who you know might play a role in influencing outcome. Another very visible aspect in India is the urban-rural divide. This divide is being bridged to some extent because of advancements in technology, infrastructure, the economy booming. However, the divide is still present. So as a result of this, there is an influx into the urban cities from rural centers because everyone wants to take advantage of the economic boom.
Yes, and as India does continue to march toward modernity, There are others that are taking part as well. The overseas, the also known as the non-resident Indian (NRI). A lot of these people, they're actually returning back to India, both to invest and to live. And this is also going to be reflected in our environment here. And that is that you'll see shopping malls everywhere. The notion of international cafes, Italian coffee and biscotti. But the one thing that does stand out that is still being addressed is that the roads and bridges and things like this, the infrastructure, it's not keeping up, it's not keeping pace. And this is often seen as the biggest obstacle towards India's continued economic growth.
Now, while this might be true, and you have a very valid point there, Indians seem to be certain about their place in the modern world, and it seems to be by the front of the line. Now, while the foreseeable future might not be very clear, one thing is certain. India has had a very, very long history, and therefore adjustments will be made. Because things are in a constant state of change. Do poverty, pollution and corruption exist side by side with affluence, technology and pro-growth policies? Absolutely. Now, India has been many things and it will continue to be so many more things. Indians know this, expect the unexpected and adapt accordingly. As should you.